Okay, so real quickly, just like we did before, I want to give you a quick overview. I want to remind you of one thing that I usually like to tell a person when I'm talking to them. One of the complaints that I get, or one of the objections that I get sometimes when I share what I just did in part two, is people say, well, I don't take all those negative things there. You know, when people tell me negative things, particularly if it's a doer, a person that just pushes through and gets tough and does the thing they need to do, they'll say, well, yeah, I've had a hard background, but, I just reject all that. Well, here's one of the things that, again, you don't have to buy. This is what I would tell the person. You don't have to buy what I'm saying here, but I would suggest to you, remember I told you that I believe you have an inner self or an internal part of you, and I called it a spirit. Well, I actually believe you're born with that. And one of the things that I want you to recognize is that I believe when you're born with that spirit you're born with is sort of drunk. Just an image I like to use to describe it. And it's kind of like this. If I'm driving a car and if I'm sober, I'm fine. I can navigate people going around me, people stopping in front of me. But if I'm drunk, I might run a red light, not realize I've run it. I can't control things all the time. Sometimes I seem to be in control. Maybe sometimes I'm not quite as drunk. But the truth is I can't control it as much. So remember what I said. When you're talking to a person, you need to make clear that they have an internal self, their inner self. I just happen to refer to it as a spirit. But I believe it's a drunk one, which means it can't always be in control. And so here's what ends up happening. The things of this world, events and people, I'm saying that I think there's an evil source in the world that's out to do me in. And even I have my own failure because nobody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes, is the big phrase we use today. Well, so that goes through my unique self. And I talked about it up here. Either I'm a thinker, I'm a feeler, or a doer. And so by design, my spirit is supposed to help me jettison the stuff that's negative, the stuff that would give me a bad view of myself on the inside. But if I'm a drunk, I've got a drunk spirit inside me, it's not going to do that. And I'm going to give you an example from my life here in just a minute. And then, of course, I end up feeling certain things, like I'm a failure, like I'm a no-hoper. I had those written down here before. And then I set out to change because I don't like feeling like that. So there's certain things I do so I don't have to feel like a no-hoper or like I'm unsuccessful or like I'm unlovable. But I'm theorizing that fails. Why? Because I've experienced that in life, and I talk to people a lot of times in life. And they get hurt, and no matter what they do on the outside, they can't fix it on the inside. And then on top of that, so then they've got to cope with the fact that they still feel the same on the inside. And when they do all of that, and maybe they try to feel better, they try to be super successful, they still feel better. They still feel the same way they felt over here. And it begins to write on the inside because they got a drunk guy that can't control any of that. And it starts to develop an inner identity or an inner value or an inner view of myself. Now, I'm going to show you, this was sort of a general view so you can understand of what we're trying to describe to the person. We're trying to describe to them how they got to have these definitions of what they feel about themselves at their worst. All I've done is describe to them how that happened in life. They had a drunk guy in charge of what they feel, think, and decide, and they may not have accepted every negative message that happened, but they accepted a lot of those. Now what I'm going to do is take my life and my history and describe to you what that would look like for Tim Lester. So if I'm talking to the individual and if I'm choosing not to give them this general idea, I'm going to describe for them, I'm actually going to ask them some questions so that I can put their life and feelings on this template, if you will. And so what I would do about that is I'd say, hey, listen, would you mind, if you don't want to, that's fine, but if you don't mind, would you mind telling me about 3 to 5 hurts that you've experienced in life? And all a hurt is, it doesn't necessarily have to be a trauma. For some people, certainly they were molested or something happened like that. That's a very traumatic thing. But it doesn't have to be those kinds of things. All that has to qualify for it to be a hurt is that it hurt you and it impacted your life. So now I'm going to tell you about a couple of 3 hurts that I had in my life, and I'm going to show you if I was going to do it for the person, if I was going to take some information about their story, their life, and explain how they got this internal sense of them, which, by the way, they've already given me, because they gave me what they feel about themselves at their worst, then I'm going to show you how I would fill this in. So here's my hurts. These are things that happened to me. One of them would be, and some people would say it's not a big deal, but when I went to first grade, my mom and dad were so excited. They took me out the night before, and we went to Dairy Queen, and we got this little boat. And it's a boat that you ate the ice cream in. I got to eat the whole thing by myself. Took it to school the next day. I had tied a string to it, and it came time from playground, and I was pulling that boat along out on the playground because I was having so much fun. I enjoyed it so much. I was so excited about first grade. And that day, a bunch of bullies came up. They stomped on my boat, and they told me that I was girly and that I looked like a girl, and I was a girl. And they really said something, and I cried. Well, you see, you don't know this about me, but I'm actually a high feeler. I'm telling you, that day I went home and I cried all day long. They finally had to come get me from school because I was just completely beside myself. Excuse me. And I don't know why, but that thing. So I had the bullies come after me and tell me I was stupid and I looked like a girl and I was a little girly boy. Well, maybe you think that shouldn't have been a big deal, but that stuck in my head. You remember, I got a drunk guy driving my car, and what might not bother one person really, really bothered me. So that was one. That would have been an early childhood experience. But here's the second thing. I'm going to fast forward to my teen years. So in my teen years, one of the things that happened along the way is I had 3 women in my life. One when I was 15. I was dating a girl that was 18. She joined my band that I'd started, and I thought I was going to be famous, and I actually set out to do that. And so she came and begged me to be in her band, and we dated for 1 year. And I was on the top of the world because I'm dating an 18-year-old. Excuse me. 1 year later, a new band started with a new guy, and she dropped me like a hot potato. And it was because I wasn't cool enough, I didn't have the best hair, and I wasn't the hottest new band in town. So I'm telling you, so that was the first girl. So there was girl number 1. And, excuse me, and so she hurt me because she dumped me. And I'll tell you what I felt from all of that. Here's another thing that happened. I had girl number 2. And I'll just talk about 2 of them. But girl number 2, her name was Jody. Jody and I talked about being married, and I was a senior in high school, and she was a sophomore at the University of Tennessee. We dated for 1.5 years. We were in love, and it was amazing because my dad didn't like her either, and I just enjoyed making my dad mad. And so I hung out with Jody, and for 1.5 years, and so I'm a senior in high school now, and finally, we're just about to the point where we're going to get married. And so I talked to Jody. I went over one day, and I knocked on Jody's door. And the apartment door kind of swung open a little bit. There's no Jody. All of her clothes are gone. All of her furniture's gone. And there's a big note, like in a tent, on her kitchen table. And the note just said Tim on it on the outside. And I opened it up, and this is what she said: Tim, you're the most wonderful man on the planet. I'll love you forever. Goodbye. And I never saw her again. Well, so Jody just bailed on me. Excuse me. Now, I had plenty of other hurts, but just for illustration purposes, I'm going to show you what happened. When these things happen, all those things, just like before, they were input that sent messages through my feeler. Well, remember, I said feelers, they can't stand have their relationships go wrong. So I'm just going to talk about the girls right now. So if I talked about these 2 girls who dumped me, this is what I ended up feeling when it went through my unique self, my mind, will, and emotions. That's primarily a feeler. I felt like there was some secret something wrong with me that no woman ever wanted to be around me. So there's something secret wrong with me. Even though in my mind I was stunningly good looking, I felt like I was a great musician, that everyone wanted to be around me, that there was something so wrong with me that nobody even wanted to tell me what it was. It was so bad. I felt like I was unlovable. I felt like I was not enough. And for some reason, I felt incredibly guilty and that I was weak. So if I'm taking a person's history or their story and they tell me what some of their hurts, I'd say, okay, well, what message? So this is what I would say to them. When that girl Jody dumped you, what message do you think that sent you, and did you buy it? Well, all of these things right here are all the messages that I ended up buying. So that's what I ended up feeling from all that. Well, okay, so I might ask the person, so what did you do to cope with that, to try to change things on the outside so you could feel better on the inside? Well, I'm Tim and I know that, so I'm going to tell you how I would have answered that question. The first thing I did is I started taking karate and I started bodybuilding. And the reason I did that is because I decided I was going to be so strong and so buff that there'd never be a woman leave me again. So that's the first thing I did. The second thing I did is I really kicked it up with my band, and I decided I was going to try to see if I couldn't get us recorded. So I really went hardcore on that. Excuse me. Another thing that I did is I just completely swore off of women for a while, because I was hurting so bad, so I wouldn't give any women the time of day. All those things, and what I wanted them to see is I am the catch that got away. Now you say, well, Tim, you're sick. Well, that's fine, but the point is that's what I tried to change on the outside. So I wanted to be famous, and I wanted to be buff. And in my mind, I wouldn't have to feel like there was anything wrong with me and I wasn't enough. There was only one problem. Nobody knew this, but none of that helped. I was winning meets in bodybuilding, and my band was becoming more and more famous, and I still felt the same way on the inside. Well, that doesn't feel very good, so here's what I would do. There's several things. One, I never got into the drinking and drugs thing, but I would just constantly watch TV, and I could escape from that, all that. One of the things I did was porn. And the great thing about it is when you're looking at some woman, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to women, but when you're looking at some woman and whatever level of porn that you're involved with, it's not about the sexual thing that's going on. It's about the love and acceptance that you receive because she's smiling at you and she thinks you're the most wonderful thing on the planet. Again, no disrespect to any women that are listening to this right now. So that's what happened. That's one of the other things. I was absolutely driven to be successful. So I got involved with who would soon be the governor of Tennessee, and my goal was to make a whole bunch of money. So I'd run the money. I wanted to have the coolest car on campus, and so I set out to actually build a car that was just for me. And so all those things are things I did to cope. There's a lot of other things, but all those things would temporarily make me forget that I was still feeling like what I felt. But then that finally failed me, and I still felt like a complete failure. So it started to form an identity on the inside for me. And so this is what the board might look like when you get done if you take the person's history. And so then I might look at them at that point. I'd just say, hey, listen, you know what? If I had happened what happened to you, I might have some of the same kinds of feelings that we talked about, what you feel about yourself at your worst on the inside. And so rather than condemn them for the way they feel, or maybe even some of the ways they reacted, I can honestly say, I see why you ended up feeling what you feel. And so that's where we would go with that. Now I want to begin to make a transition, and I'm going to go ahead and erase this other board that I had before. And I'm going to show you how we begin to introduce the actual solution to all this. So looking at our board, we recognize that I've got a drunk guy driving my car. And I've had all this input, and I go into this spiral, and it ends up developing a negative identity in me, a negative view of me. And on top of that, here's the problem. I've still got this evil source, this world, events and people coming at me again and again. And all that time, they're impacting me because I'm reacting now out of what I feel on the inside. And so then what I would do, I'd either use the same diagram, or maybe I'd just draw another doughboy to illustrate it the way it was. Boy, that's really bad. And so I'd do something like this, and I still have my spirit on the inside, and I still have my mind, will, and emotions up in my brain. Again, I'm not going to rewrite all that on there right now. But I will put this guy, this drunk guy that I had on the inside. And what I'm saying is when I have a drunk guy on the inside of me as my spirit, I don't have the ability to control this evil source that I was talking about before. The world, the evil source, and my own failure. Well, right now, I want to tell you what I think that evil source is. You don't have to buy this. It's just what I'm suggesting that it is. I'm telling you that I believe that evil source is Satan. And I think he's out to steal, kill, and destroy your very life. The world is still there. There's still events and people that are out to get you. And of course, you still have your own failure. And so here's what happens. What would happen if I could somehow fix this drunk guy on the inside? The one that doesn't have the ability to jettison all that out of controlledness you have. Well, do you remember that when we were talking about how this spiral happens? Well, every time that spiral happens, all of that is logged in your memory. And the best way I'm going to describe it to you is there's a hotel in your brain. And it remembers every experience you've ever experienced in life. And so here's what happens. The unholy trinity comes to your unique self, your mind, will, and emotions, and it still gives input just like we talked about before. And it still sends these negative messages. Now, if we could somehow get rid of that drunk guy, and so we're going to just X him out. And in his place, we're going to put a brand new person. I'm going to suggest that Jesus Christ figured out a way to come and live inside every single person. And when he did that, I'm going to let my marker just dry up here for a minute. Jesus Christ says, I have a fix for that mess that you have. And he said that he did it by this. He came into this earth. He discovered how to live as a human being. He died for my sins and came back from the dead. And he says, as a result of that, I can come live in you. I'm going to describe to you what Christ did and what he made it possible for every individual when he did that. So Christ came inside, has the ability to come inside. And I'm telling you, he actually kills the drunk guy. He gets rid of him. And when he does that, he puts a little door, or there is a little door, between my spirit and my brain. Christ has now come to live inside me, but I still have the unholy trinity coming and feeding all kinds of stuff. Events and people still come and really battle against me. And I'm saying that I believe that there's a Satan that orchestrates that. And so he comes to my brain, except here's a difference now. I actually have a sober spirit whose name is Jesus. And here's the thing about it. This new sober spirit I have in me, this inside self that I have, is actually a spirit that's full of power. And this sober spirit that I have is full of love and acceptance. If you'll remember, I said your spirit has this driving, desiring need. And it's a need to be loved and to be accepted. And Jesus comes and lives inside me, and he does several things. The first thing he is, my failure that's over here, he deals with by saying, I forgive all of that. As a matter of fact, not only do I forgive it, I'm actually going to make it possible for you to move out of all the crazy things that you do that cause life to not go well for you. And so that's the first thing he does. But one of the things that happens is Christ has a way, and we're just going to imagine it, that there's a door between my spirit and my brain, or my mind, will, and my emotions. And so he makes it possible for that door to open up, and here's what happens. Christ at any one moment has the ability to flow into or to influence my mind, will, and emotions, my unique self. Now I want to describe to you what happens when that little door opens up. When that door opens up, Christ begins to deal with all the memories that are in the hotel in my mind. Well, what's there? Well, first of all, I remember every single message that's ever been given to me that tells me I'm a loser. So that's one of the things that he does. And he has a way of dealing with that. Excuse me. Christ goes up And anytime I feel something negative or those old negative messages, I'm telling you that I believe Satan tempts me to run to my old ways to cope that we talked about before, the way I tried to change myself on the inside. And what he ends up saying is that you don't need those things. Here's another thing he does. He speaks the truth to me. You see, here's the interesting thing that happens. When I come to Christ, Christ kills or does away with my inside person. And he gives me a new person that's full of life and full of acceptance and full of ability. And so at any moment when all these messages come to me from the world, and it might be from my wife, it might be from my friends, it might be from something I do and I fail, the enemy tries to whisper in my ear, and I'm saying the enemy is Satan. He tries to whisper in my ear, you're a no-hoper, you're a loser, you're a nobody. And Christ says, no, I died for you because you were so important and so valuable to me. So he speaks the truth to you. But here's another thing that's really important. Psychology today, and I am one of those, has one thing it tells you to do. They would say, and everybody agrees with this, that all of us have hurts in our memories that have wounded us emotionally. And the best we can ever do is to try to manage that. Here's when I tell you something about having a live spirit in me that's sober, that's full of power. I'm telling you that Christ has the ability to heal up emotional wounds from the past. He can actually make it possible, yes, for you to manage those, but to be honest with you, he has the ability to begin over time to heal up your emotional wounds. Here's another thing. He has the ability to give you desires that you don't have. For instance, if my wife has betrayed me, or a friend has taken advantage of me, or someone's hurt me and I'm having trouble forgiving them, Christ's life in me, this incredibly powerful spirit that's full of acceptance, has the ability to place a desire in me to forgive a person that I don't want to forgive. And it's not against my will because I invite Christ in. But the truth is he has the ability to give me the ability to desire, to want to do life differently, to move in a different way. And not only that, I've had plenty of desires to do the right thing, but I just can't get it done. He actually gives me the ability or the power to do what I wasn't able to do before. And so here's the way it works. Christ's life goes up into my mind, will, and emotions when I open the door to his life. And when I open the door to his life, the door is wide open, and his sober life that's full of love and acceptance, literally at the point when I'm being tempted to believe something negative about myself, tempted to believe a bunch of trash, tempted to go do something that even I know is not healthy for me. He actually gives me the ability, first of all, to understand I'm completely accepted. I don't ever have to do anything to feel acceptance again. But he actually gives me healing, and he gives me the ability to have a new desire to operate a whole nother way. You see, I'm not in slavery to people anymore. As a matter of fact, I want to tell you something. There's something the scriptures teach, and while I realize you don't really buy the Bible and things like that, I'm just asking you to consider it as a real life thing. It says that before Jesus Christ comes inside a person and forgives them for all the things that they've done wrong, he actually does that I'm actually chained to the evil source in this world. But when Christ actually replaces that old drunk spirit that I had inside me, that, by the way, the Bible calls Adam's life, but doesn't matter about that, just this old drunk spirit, that when Christ comes in, he breaks the chains, and I no longer am enslaved to events and people in my life. Christ's life goes up, in every one of those rooms that has a memory, one by one, he begins like a divine maid to clean up the rooms in my mind. And so over time, he heals more and more and more. And at the moment when I believe Satan comes to tempt me to remain in unforgiveness, to do something to try to change myself on the outside so I can feel better on the inside, what his Holy Spirit does is whispers to me an amazing thing. You're mine, and you're valuable, and you don't need anybody else's approval. Not because you're trying to withdraw from people, but because internally, inside yourself, you know you're completely loved and accepted. And then here's an interesting thing. He gives you the desire to obey, and then what happens, you actually do what is the right thing to do naturally, because it's not because you got strong. It's because this spirit that he put within you is actually doing something you could never do before. So then I want to then give you a few ideas. This is the thing I'd share. And so what I would review with the person is simply this. I want you to see that the solution for doing away with all that trash that was in your head is you need something that's beyond you. More specifically, you need someone beyond you to actually heal up all that's in your brain. So the first thing Christ does is he relieves you of the weight of all that you've done that's the wrong way of doing life. That's the first thing you do. So we in Christian circles, we actually call that guilt. And if you don't like the word guilt for right now, how about we go with regrets? Have you ever done anything you're going, look, if I had to do that, if I had to do over on that, I'd have never done that before. Whatever all that is, Christ says, I died on the cross and shed my blood, the Son of God, because he's called the Son of God, so that you would not have to, I could lift those regrets, that guilt that you have internally off. But not only that, I actually am going to fix what Satan undid your whole life. All the damage, everything that he's caused on the inside of you, I actually have a way of healing you up and actually give you back control of your life, in the sense of that you will have a live spirit that's sober, that has power and has the ability to control your mind, will, and emotions. Not because he's trying to make you a puppet, because you invite him to do what you can't do by yourself. And so now he's bringing about healing, and he's giving you new desires, and he's giving you the ability to actually live life in a way that is healthy and honorable and right, and actually gives you the ability, he calls it, living life to the full. And I'm concerned right now for you that you're caught in that trap we were talking about before. And you're caught in an eternal trap that just over and over again you're being influenced by the people that come into your life. I'm telling you that the solution for dealing with that, what you felt about yourself at your worst, is that thing has to be done away with. And there's a way that can happen, and it's by you accepting Jesus Christ. Now, hey, listen, if you don't want to buy that, that's fine. If you actually don't think that Christ has the ability to come and live inside you, please, I want you to understand, I'm not trying to bully you into this. I just want you to understand that Christ loved you so much that he said, I don't want to leave you in this state of brokenness and woundedness. I don't want to leave you where you just spend your whole life trying to figure out some way to feel better on the outside by doing things on the outside to feel better on the inside. Listen, I really appreciate you sticking with us, actually looking through these diagrams. If you have questions, certainly feel free. We're going to make these available and give you an opportunity to ask questions as you go through. If there's something you think might, you come up with an idea that you might think would be a good way to talk with someone who hasn't yet chosen to be a Christ follower, that's fine. Also, remember this. You can go to the website if you have interest about unique self. Go to the website, www.abidinglife.com. It's www.abidinglife.com. You can take the unique self test, and frankly, there's a lot of other resources on there. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Pray that God bless you as you try to share with other people about Christ.